Hello and welcome to today's NBS webinar, Fire Safety and the RIBA Plan of Work. A little bit of housekeeping to kick off. The webinar is going to last for about an hour. Everybody's on mute, but you can make comments, ask questions through the little dialogue box, and we'll follow these up after the session. If anybody wants to contribute on Twitter, hashtag NBS webinar, we'll keep an eye on that as well. Just a reminder that all of these webinars every Tuesday are around the topics in the RIBA Plan of Work 2020. There's sort of key strategies that are highlighted here on the left. Last week we looked at sustainability. This week we're looking at fire safety. My name's Stephen Hamill. I'm Innovation Director here at NBS, and I'll be starting the webinar off and sort of wrapping it up at the end. The first speaker is Dame Judith Hackett, and what we're doing is we're going to present the presentation she gave at the NBS Construction Product Leadership Summit earlier this year. So it's a great chance to play that out today to not just the manufacturers, but all of the architects and engineers that are listening in today. And then we finish off the presentation from my colleague James Smith, technical author at NBS, who will look at fire safety and specification. So chock-a-block webinar. So we'll go straight in now, and we'll hear from Dame Judith Hackett.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to talk you through the background to my report. I want to go over it again. I'm confident you've all read it, of course, from cover to cover, but I think it's quite important just to pick out some of the key points about why I did it, what were the key messages that came out of it, and to reiterate some of those, because this is not just about putting a new regulatory system in place. It's about truly learning lessons and taking responsibility for what needs to happen going forward, rather than waiting for the regulations to tell you what you must do. So, I'm going to go over the past as quickly as I can and get on to what's coming next. But let's just remember what the scope of my review was all about. And I really just want to echo that first point, because so often people say to me, your review was all about Grenfell, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. My review happened because of Grenfell, but was not about Grenfell. The review was commissioned by the government in the weeks immediately after the tragedy at Grenfell because there was a concern that some of the emerging issues coming out of the initial investigation into Grenfell suggested that maybe it was a one-off, or maybe we needed to be more concerned that perhaps other buildings were at risk. And it was that discovery in those first few weeks after Grenfell that a number of other high-rise buildings were not as they should be when those surveys were done that led to my review. So it very quickly became apparent in those first few weeks that there were hundreds of high-rise buildings that did not have compliant cladding on them. There were hundreds of buildings that did not have fire doors that met the required specification and so on. And it was at that point that the Secretary of State asked me to look at the regulatory system and explain how it was that a regulatory system that people thought would deliver the right outcomes was not doing that. So it was an end-to-end review of the regulatory system. And I'm going to say a bit more in a minute about what I mean by a regulatory system. It was about assessing the effectiveness of the regulations, yes. Focusing on high-rise buildings, yes, because high-rise buildings equal places of multiple occupancy. But they are not the only buildings of multiple occupancy, and I'll come back to that too. What I was asked to do was to make recommendations to ensure a robust and more effective regulatory system for the future, take time to look at and learn from others elsewhere in the world if they could offer us any clues as to what we could do better, and to keep it very separate from the sensitive work that was going on and continues as part of the public inquiry and the police investigation into Grenfell itself. So, let's just stop and think about that for a minute. Quite a challenging remit. Navigate your way around the specifics of Grenfell and don't do anything in any way to get in the way of justice being done and being seen to be done in the end about the specifics. But also look at the whole system. Cover the whole of new building life cycle and also renovation of existing buildings. So this is not just about accept what we've got and let's get better for the future. This is about how do we address the problems we've already created by allowing buildings to be built that are not fit for purpose. Question I'm often asked is, why me? Why did I do it? Well, I'm sure a number of you have Googled me. You might know something about my background. But let me just tell you a few things that I think are pretty important. The first is that I'm an engineer, a chemical engineer, as it happens. I've worked in the chemical and petrochemical industry for many years before I took on the role of chair of the Health and Safety Executive for almost a decade, starting in 2007 and finishing at the end of 2016. I hadn't been involved in construction before, and in many ways I think that was a strength rather than a weakness, because it brought a fresh pair of eyes and an ability to ask the really simple questions and say, how is this done in this industry, but also able to compare with the way things are done in other sectors. And again, I'll come back to that in due course. I'm apolitical. I'm not a subscriber to any particular political party. So in every sense, I brought objectivity and independence to this review. Okay, I said I was going to talk about what makes a good regulatory system. One of the first conversations I had when I was invited, that's a good word, isn't it? Invited to do this review was some of the people in the Department of Communities and Local Government said to me, so, if you're going to review the regulations, we'll need to print off for you a full set of the building regulations and the fire safety regulations and all the guidance, right? And I said, no thanks. If you want that job done and you're looking for someone to review every clause in this set of regulations and the guidance, it's a lawyer you need, not an engineer. I want to understand how this system works. So, for me, what makes a good regulatory system is a system that drives the right behaviours. It doesn't matter what the rules say, if they are written in such a way as they drive the wrong behaviours, then it is not an effective system. So it's about much more than what is written down. It is absolutely crucial for any regulatory system to have an effective regulator in place, as well as good rules written down. If the regulator is not effective, and if that regulator does not have to hand the right incentives and sanctions to promote the right behaviours and discourage or deter the wrong behaviours, the regulatory system will not work. There needs to be clarity on roles and responsibilities, so that people can't point the finger at one another and say, that's his job, not mine. That's not my responsibility, it's someone else's. For a regulatory system to be effective, there also has to be a lack of ambiguity. It has to be coherent. For me, there is a whole question around prescription versus describing the outcomes you want to achieve. The more the policymakers write things in a prescriptive way, the more you will drive people to tick boxes and not take responsibility for decision making. There has to be discipline and there has to be assurance. All of those features are essential in a good regulatory system. I'm not the expert on the building regulation system that you are operating with today, but I ask every one of you in this room to think about all of those things listed there, and you tell me how good the system is that you are operating within today. It's too prescriptive. It's all about rules that people play games with. The incentives are not there to do the right thing. The sanctions for doing the wrong thing are ridiculously low. And there is ambiguity and lack of clarity about who should do what all over the place. So, a lot to be done. We did it in a relatively short space of time. We started immediately after the Grenfell fire in August 2017. My final report was published less than a year later. The government then, by the end of 2018, announced that all 53 recommendations in my report were going to be implemented. And for those of you who have read the report, you will know that one of the things I said right at the start of the report was, do not cherry pick. Do not cherry pick these recommendations. It is a change to the whole system, and you have to implement the whole thing to deliver the change. And that is exactly what we're going to do. And then last year, the consultation process on the regulatory changes was announced, and you will know that since then, we have had notification via the Queen's speech that regulation is to be introduced this year, and I am now chairing, as you heard, the transition board to set up the new regulator. So no one can be in any doubt at all that this is coming, it is going to happen, and it's time to get ready. So let's have a look in a little bit more detail then at some of the problems. I've already said a little bit alongside that comparison of what does and doesn't make a good regulatory system. The current system is weak, it's ineffective, there's no enforcement. I think we will learn to you will learn to the cost, the level of ambiguity that was introduced into this system through the change in the way in which building control works with part private, part local authority regulators. I think that has not helped in this system, but by no means am I blaming that one set of individuals any more than anyone else, because I think everyone within this system has had a part to play in the decay that has taken place in the whole system over a number of years. I think the behaviour of the industry is best characterised, as I said at the time, as a race to the bottom. Another way of describing it is using the regulations in the sense of, if the regulations don't tell me I can't do something, I'll assume I can. Even when your common sense tells you you shouldn't, if there isn't a clause in the regulations that say that's not allowed, it still happens. The guidance is prescriptive, it's siloed, confusing, approved documents written in different sections, as you all know, as if energy efficiency and fire safety are completely independent, when the materials you're using to do both are one and the same thing. So how can you write guidance in such a siloed way when it's outcomes and effects you're trying to deliver? For someone who came out of the chemical industry, the process of change management that goes on in this sector is gobsmacking. Nothing short of gobsmacking. I have to say that for someone who came out of the chemical industry, it hasn't always been the case in my sector that change management has been handled well. There's maybe a handful of you in this room, not many more, who will remember back in the 70s when a major fire and explosion happened in the UK at Flixborough, which killed 30 people at a chemical plant near Sunderland. That happened when I was a student studying to be a chemical engineer. That was the event which, for the whole of my profession of chemical engineering, completely changed our approach to change management in our industry. Because what happened then was that someone thought it would be a good idea to simply put a pipe in place when they had to take something out of service, and they didn't engineer it properly. What happened as a result of that in terms of the disciplined way that change gets documented and reviewed in everything that is done within that industry can be traced right back to that. My view is the same will be true for your sector and Grenfell. That you will look back on this as the time when you all recognised that practices had to change. Even when experts are asked whether proposed designs should be built or not, nobody listens when they say that's not a good idea. Some of the first people I spoke to as part of my review were the fire service. And whilst not wanting to go into any of the details, as we said, about Grenfell at all, what I continue to hold on to is having fire chiefs sit in front of me in those first weeks and say to me, what are we supposed to do? They ask us whether we want them to build this proposed building like this. We are a statutory consultee in the process. We say, no, don't build it like that. We'll never be able to fight a fire in that building. And they build it anyway. And that has stuck with me throughout the whole of this review. So we have to change the system so that when you ask people, can you manage a fire in this building? If they say no, we don't ignore them. We take that into account and we act on that information. And we don't build it in such a way that we make life impossible for the people we're going to rely on in the end. Likewise, residents are not listened to when they raise concerns, when they say, this doesn't feel right, this is a concern, I don't feel safe here. We have to listen to them. This is a problem of culture. It's a problem for the construction industry, for building management, and for the regulators who oversee it, and all of those things have to change. And most relevant to all of you, I know, who are here today, underpinning all of that, the people who supply this industry, the people who provide the products that they use to build the buildings, have also to address all of the many shortcomings in the way that products are tested, the way that they are traced and recorded as having been used, and as part of that change to change management, the way in which products are substituted in an ill-disciplined and poorly recorded way, all of that has to change in the future. This is my favourite and famous diagram, and everybody looks at it and goes, oh my God, she's going to talk us through that now. I'm not. The only reason I use this slide in presentations is to say, this was the turning point in my review. And this was my alternative approach to reading every single clause of the regulations and the guidance. Because what I actually did was what any engineer would do, which is to say, explain to me how this works and how it's supposed to work. So this is how the system you currently operate within is supposed to work. What it enabled me to do as part of the review was to say to people, so does it work like this? Is this what happened? No, it doesn't work like that at all. No, we get round that bit. No, we don't do that. No, we ignore that. It all came out when I started to say to people, is that what you do? No. I'll be honest, I'm not surprised you don't do what that system requires you to do, because it's inordinately complex. It's set up in such a way that people are bound behaviourally to find ways around it, because it's too difficult and too cumbersome. So we have to have a much simpler system, but a better system going forward. So you'll know that in my final report, that was how I came at this and said, let's try and change this, and let's try and change not just bits, but the whole system. We need clearer accountability. We need a stronger regulator. At the time, I said that needed to be a joint competent authority, engaging a number of the other people who I've already spoken about, and in particular, the Health and Safety Executive, and I'll come back to that in a minute. We certainly need a stronger enforcement and sanctioning package. The levels of fines that currently exist in the system provide no deterrent whatsoever and actually make it worth people's whiles to chance it, in my view. So we have to change that and change it significantly to put the sort of penalties in place that will make sure that boards in every part of this industry will sit up and take notice and will actively manage their organisations in ways that they will not be party to the sharp practices that go on currently. That regulator will not simply, in the future, look to see that you have complied with the rules. They will look to see that there is evidence of people having built buildings that are safe. There will be a requirement to demonstrate that you have done everything possible to deliver and to manage through its occupation and refurbishment and all of that, a process that is safe and allows people to live with that assurance that their building is safe. Safe design, changes properly documented, reviewed, and implemented, and occupation simply not allowed until that building has been deemed to be safe. That means clear responsibilities during that process of build or refurbishment, and that then has to continue through the process of building management and occupation. That's what the safety case regime will look like. There are also moves as part of this change to the regulatory system to ensure that residents have a voice, and that's a different debate for a different day. Government is already looking at the guidance, and there will be a transition process where guidance will become less prescriptive and more about delivering the right outcomes. There is a real need for this industry to address the issue not just of discipline in terms of what is provided in terms of material, but also in terms of the people who then apply those materials, installers, all need to be competent to and know the critical features of the materials that they are going to use. Because there is no doubt, and you all know this, that it is perfectly possible to specify the right materials, and if you don't know what you're doing when you install it, you can completely destroy the integrity of perfectly good materials through incompetent installation. So we have to address not just the specification of the materials, but the quality assurance of the way in which those materials are used and applied. And all of that needs to be underpinned, as I've already said, by a much stronger testing and labelling and traceability process, so that we will not only know what was used, but we will be able to provide those who will use the building for many, many years to come with an accurate record of what it is they have, what the safety critical features of that building are, and what are the things that they must be very careful not to change in order not to destroy the integrity of the building during its life cycle. This is a systems-based approach. I make no apology for that. I believe it's the only way of looking at this problem. Any of you who will have seen my interviews on the day that I launched this report will know that everybody wanted me to say, it's the cladding. You all know, because you're part of this industry, that it's not the cladding. The cladding is one feature of a much bigger problem. I am tackling the big problem here, not just the cladding. We need people to take responsibility, to be accountable, and the regulatory system will ensure that that is the case. But more importantly than that, we need a culture change in this industry. You need to care about the buildings that you are in the supply chain for. You need to care that the people who are going to live in them and work in them and sleep in them feel safe and are safe in the buildings that you are part of the supply chain for. And until you care, this system will not change and will not work. And that is the culture that needs to change alongside the regulatory change that is coming. It's going to be risk-based, it's going to be proportionate, and it's going to ensure that those at the highest risk, the high-rise buildings, those buildings of multiple occupancy, but also those buildings where very vulnerable people live, like care homes, hospitals, and all of those things, a higher level of rigour and a higher level of oversight will be in place to ensure that the highest risks are managed to the highest level. But this is a culture change that needs to go through the whole of the industry. And it's an outcomes-based framework, not lots and lots of prescription about what you must use. So judgment, informed judgment, responsible judgment is going to be required from everyone in the system. But it will be a much simpler system. Tougher, yes, but a lot simpler to understand. And I would venture to suggest a lot more difficult to get you around, to do workarounds. So, we come on to where are we now? Well, in 2019, as I said earlier, we heard that the recommendations would be implemented in full. What was really interesting to me is that in our UK system, we have a system of select committees in Parliament, cross-party select committees. I've been a regular visitor to the Communities and Local Government Select Committee. What's really interesting is that every single one of them supports this. That means there is cross-party, cross-government, and cross-opposition support for making this change. We've had competency working groups set up. Huge amount of work has been done, and the Raising the Bar report details in great depth the competency changes that need to be made in a whole range of different occupations and professions within the sector. There's been a joint regulatory group set up and working for some time. I'd have to say that hasn't, up until now, has not made as much progress as I would have hoped, but that's about to change. I've been chairing an industry safety steering group where we have been bringing different people in from industry to encourage that culture change and people to think in advance about what they're going to do and how they're going to prepare for what's coming. There's been a portfolio board set up and running by government, so there's lots going on. And as I say right at the end of this slide, the announcement was in the Queen's speech back in October. No one can be in any doubt that this is coming. Too slow to date, but we have to change that. I've sort of talked a little bit about this already, in that I think one of the findings from this review for me is that it's sad that other industry sectors who have been down this road and who have had to learn from tragedies in the past, and there are a number, it isn't just the oil and gas industry, there are other sectors that you can look at who've been through that same journey of learning the lessons through failure. And it's sad to me that this sector has had to go down that same road of learning that lesson for itself. The good news, however, is that because a number of those other sectors have been down this road before and have learned from their failure, if you ask them, they'll be able to tell you some of the tools and techniques that they've put in place, ways in which they've changed their behaviour, and the fact that it isn't all impossible, it isn't all about adding cost, and actually it's made life a lot simpler and a lot clearer for them, and they're glad that they made that change. And I think if you, as an industry, adopt that approach of learning from others, even now, you can learn and accelerate the progress at which you move by taking that on board and getting to grips with some of these things in the way that other sectors have. I just want to say a little bit now about the Industry Safety Steering Group. As I said, I've been chairing that for over a year now. We've got senior people on there from a whole range of different industry sectors, from finance, from aviation, and other sectors. And what's clear is that there is progress. There are a number of forward-thinking companies spread throughout all different parts of this supply chain within the construction sector who are already making moves and already doing the right things. But my observations would be that there's not enough of it. There's a lack of leadership, a lack of real drive and collective commitment to make this happen. There's too many excuses, and the best one of all that I hear more often than not is, well, this is such a fragmented industry, it's so hard. Well, perhaps you need to change the level of fragmentation in the industry in that case. Maybe some of the adversarial practices within this industry need to change. Maybe you need to become more collaborative, less fragmented, and recognize that you have a collective purpose. What's also become apparent during the last few months that we've been running this industry safety steering group is that the market is starting to react. You cannot have failed to have read in the press only very recently about the number of apartment blocks that are now being rated as zero value, because the surveyors who are providing information to the mortgage brokers are looking at those blocks of flats and they're saying no. They're finding small amounts of cladding, and some would say they're overreacting, but they are reacting, and they are reacting to what they're seeing and saying, this is not a good risk. We do not want to lend money on this, so the market is reacting. The insurance market is reacting. So it isn't just mortgage lenders, the insurance market is reacting. I don't know how many of you in this room have tried to get professional indemnity insurance in the last 12 months. It's getting more difficult. It's not just the regulators who are going to require this change of you. And the pressure on the industry to change is building, and it is coming from more than just the regulator. But in spite of all of that, I still get this strong sense that the industry is waiting to be told what to do by the regulator. And I don't know why. Because you know what you need to do. And I believe you can get on with it. I believe it is folly not to get on with it. Because as I said earlier on, this is not just about new build. This won't just be a change of standards for new buildings from the day that the regulations come into force. These regulations will apply to the existing stock of buildings. So anything that you supplied into that is already out there, these questions are going to get asked of you. So why wouldn't you change as soon as you can to put right those sins of the past and be in a much better position to answer those questions rather than waiting for the regulations to tell you that you have to do it? What we are seeing, and I think this is a good thing, is the re-emergence of clerks of works. And I think that is one of the most positive signs that things are changing. It's good news, because it means that level of assurance is starting to re-emerge in this process, and it's long overdue. But what worries me, and as I said, is that everyone tells me we've learned the lessons of Grenfell. But it's coming up to 3 years since Grenfell. How many buildings have we built in the last 3 years? And are they really any better than the ones we built before then? How many buildings have we refurbished in the last 3 years? Have they been done to a better standard? Are people still gaming the system? I think the story of the halls of residence in Bolton, where one building was refurbished and the other was not to the same extent because the height was slightly different, tells us that people are still playing games with the system rather than taking the true messages to heart. So, new system is coming. It will require a focus on demonstrating safety of buildings for use and occupation. That will be a safety case regime for higher rise buildings. As I said, it's not going to be based on height alone. It is about the number and the vulnerability of people who are exposed to risk. That's what this is all about. There will be gateways in the system at design and commissioning stage. It will not be enough to simply specify what you want to build. You will have to prove that you have built what you said you were going to build, or if you changed it, why you changed it, and how that continues to provide a building that is equivalent to that which was proposed. The supply chain, you need to be ready for that. You need to be able to provide data and performance accreditation. And as I've said earlier, performance doesn't just come from materials, it comes from people as well. So I think you need to think long and hard, not just about specifying the right things, but specifying and having a role in ensuring that the installation is correctly carried out as well. I think this requires collaboration, data sharing. I'm not proposing any particular system. I'm not here to endorse any product. But what I am here to tell you is that you need to have standard systems. You need to have better performance testing. You need to stop substituting in such an undisciplined way. You need to provide advice on use and application if we're going to have competent people. And you need to adopt a philosophy that I call product stewardship. When the stuff leaves your premises, that is not the end of the story. You have to follow it through in terms of where it goes and how it's used. I said a little bit earlier about existing building stock, and it is a different challenge, there is no doubt about that, because we do have to go back and assess and address what we already have. We have to look at whether or not there are more buildings that we need to go back and address. Yes, the focus is on cladding now, but that's not the whole story. And there will be a requirement to make improvements. And what I can tell you for sure is that simply holding your hands up and saying, we don't know, we have no idea what is in that building, we don't know what we used, we have no records, it isn't going to cut it. So whatever you can do to help that process of information gathering about what we've already done will be very welcome. And the list of concerns is growing. It started out with ACM cladding. It's now about expanded polystyrene. It's about timber frame buildings. It's about wooden balconies and facades, and the list goes on. So let's start looking back and gathering the data that we can and starting to build those records for that stock of buildings we already have, which we're going to have to live with for decades to come, and which we simply cannot accept carrying on with them in the state that they are in. I think all of this requires a digital approach. I don't think there can be any question about that at all. You're going to have to give assurance and proof. Value engineering needs to be what it really is, which is about value, not simply cost cutting. You deliver value by delivering what you said you were going to deliver, and that means performance, not simply something that's cheaper and might be okay. This is going to change the way building owners, occupiers, and financiers react and interact with you as part of the supply chain. And I think this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to leave that race to the bottom behind and change the way this industry operates for good. And you have an opportunity not just to change what we do here at home, but to set a new standard for the rest of the world. Because everybody needs to do this. I mentioned at the start that part of my remit was to say, is anyone else doing this really well? And the answer is no. There are similar problems in other parts of the world, so there's actually the potential for this to be a market advantage for all of you, not just here in the UK, but more broadly. And I just want to finish, I think, by coming on to this last point about high-rise, because if you're going to game the system, then the height that we set for safety case regime matters. Because if you're still in that mindset of, I'm going to do what the regulations tell me, you're going to change what you do on high-rise buildings and never mind everybody else. But if you truly care about the quality of what you do, and you recognise that you are part of a hugely important social contribution to this country, which is building homes and hospitals and care homes for people to live in and be safe, you won't stop at 18 metres or 11 metres or whatever the height is. You'll change all of your practices, and you will change them for good and forever. This change is coming. I think you've got an opportunity to get ready for it, get ahead of it, so that when the regulations hit the ground, it's no big deal, because you're already on the case and you're already doing it. And that is the opportunity that you have in front of you today. But to do this and to learn the lessons of the past requires humility. Forget the excuses. Admit we've done things wrong in the past, because until you do that, you can't move on and you can't change. Whilst ever you're making excuses for what you've done in the past, you're denying your role in that supply chain. But the choice is yours. Are you going to make the most of this opportunity, or are you going to see the change that's coming as a threat? I actually don't think you've got an option. You may think otherwise, and we can debate that in the Q&A session later. Thank you.
You have just finished watching Dame Judith Hackrick's presentation, and I hope you have found it as interesting and as useful as I did. I will now do my presentation and hope you find it as useful. So first off, my name is James Smith and I am a technical author within the NBS technical team. The authors, along with the rest of the technical team, are from various construction backgrounds, including architects, engineers and surveyors. I am personally an architectural technologist with 20 years experience in the construction industry, and I am going to talk to you today about fire safety and the plan of work. When authoring and researching for content, we make sure that we look at and consider fire performance where applicable, and that will include fire resistance and reaction to fire and other items that are applicable. For example, surface spread of flame. Our content is also structured fairly flexibly so that it can cover performance or prescriptive specifications depending on which contract the specifier is using. I should emphasise though that NBS software are only tools to make your specification easier and quicker to complete. NBS Chorus has taken this experience forward by moving the specification online and allowing it to be created and updated by multiple users, one which may include your fire specialist from a different company or in another country if required. At NBS, our approaches are that we do not determine what does or does not comply with fire requirements, but we do offer guidance and resources to aid decision making, and we do offer the structure to carry and evolve fire strategy and expectations through the project timeline. Moving on to the format of NBS specification tools. NBS Chorus provides template clauses that offer users the means to set out fire performance requirements tailored to meet individual scenarios for project management, whole project requirements, building fabric, services installations, civil engineering and landscape provision. To support this, relevant regulatory guidance, standards, codes of practice and other reference resources, this includes trade body literature and appropriate websites, and signposting are given in our general guidance text and clause guidance text. Following the tragic events that occurred at Grenfell in July 2017, there has been a period of re-evaluation of the construction industry to make sure that it does not happen again. Since Grenfell, the Building a Safer Future consultation reports and implementation plans, commonly known as the Hackett reports, have been issued that confirms areas that the industry needs to improve. Since Grenfell, RIBA have issued several documents, including the RIBA Plan of Work for Fire Safety, and very recently, RIBA have issued an updated RIBA Plan of Work 2020. The RIBA Plan of Work for Fire Safety document provides a simple, effective and clear structure, setting out Hackett's golden thread of information, identifying when built environment professionals, legislators and those interested in building projects are required to review their deliverables against the current fire safety information, and when duty holders are required to sign off the information as conforming to the regulatory requirements and approved plans. Please note that the duty holder is the person or organisation that are accountable for confirming the requirements at each particular stage. The new RIBA Plan of Work 2020 replaces the previous 2013 version, which includes reference to a fire safety strategy. This strategy emphasises the importance of fire in the design of a project from its initiation through to its asset management stage. It's from this document, along with reference to the RIBA Plan of Work for Fire Safety, that I'm going to identify some ways that the fire safety strategy can be incorporated as part of your specification as the project develops and then developed during construction and beyond. At NBS, the importance of the specification is in maintaining the original performance requirements, particularly in relation to fire, has become an important subset of the work we do as an authoring team. We've put a lot of work in reviewing how fire is dealt with in the specification and what we can do to improve this golden thread. NBS Chorus is based upon the Uniclass 2015 classification system and allows you to specify at various stages of the project as a continual work in progress document by allowing the specifier to create and maintain the specification online to ensure that the original design requirements and any subsequent changes to the building are captured, recorded and able to be retrieved to maintain the required fire safety. Moving on to more detail, we'll set out the kind of coverage in NBS Chorus that can help with delivering fire performance content for projects that is in line with the Hackett Report's requirement for a key dataset, a subset of building information held in a specified format that is required as part of the golden thread. In line with the golden thread, the fire safety of a building is only successful if all parts are considered as a whole. NBS can help with the delivery of this golden thread by allowing for granularity in setting project requirements from inception through to completion. By capturing specification decisions throughout the project timeline, there is the potential to follow this through into facilities management and in-use appraisals to ensure the desired outcomes are achieved. So in the early stage of a work defined as the briefing stage of the RIBA Plan of Work, we have Stage 0, strategic definition, and Stage 1, preparation and briefing. Strategic fire performance requirements can be set out using NBS Chorus project management editable clauses. These project management clauses can be used to set out the compliance route that is to be used for the whole project. There are typically three compliance approaches that exist for meeting the requirements of UK building regulations: general, alternative and fire safety engineering. With client input and following a risk evaluation, the decision may be based on input and briefing requirements from the client and the outcome of a risk evaluation process, and then the most appropriate method can be set out and adopted at this early stage using sections from the Uniclass 2015 preliminaries content set, namely the PM35 section, PM35 that covers project performance requirements. In this case, PM35 3030 item 10, fire safety compliance route, should be used. The guidance for this section is fairly substantial to assist the specifier and to point them in direction of things to consider to allow a full evaluation to be made before the specifier makes a decision with the client. One item I would like to highlight is a change in the wording of the recent approved documents B for England, that they cover common building situations, but those with responsibility for meeting the requirements of the regulations will need to consider for themselves whether following the guidance in the approved documents is likely to meet those requirements in the particular circumstances of their case. This reiterates NBS approach that we only provide guidance and resources to aid decision making. As a lot of buildings are atypical, alternative approaches may need to be considered. Please note that if a fire engineering approach is to be used, this is typically beyond the specification's capability, as this requires modelling, etc. The outcomes and requirements of the fire engineering process, although, can be specified. There are multiple special building types that have further requirements set upon them for various reasons. For example, if it is a healthcare building, it may need to comply with health technical memorandums. The clause item, PM 353020, item 20, provides advice on other additional considerations. You can see this at the bottom of the screen here. Please note that the client, insurer or warranty requirements may impose supplementary specific demands, typically in relation to property protection, and they should be checked early on in the design stage. They can be identified and recorded at this stage to assist with the design as it progresses. All of the content in NBS Building is also available in NBS Chorus. This can be found by using UK CAUS Preliminaries and UK CAUS Work section in the content set selections when adding a specification. On the screen, the BO5 section in the CAUS specification structure, which we have recently added, is shown. This covers early stage fire strategy. This is a small part of the specification in CAUS, but it is very important as it will allow the fire safety strategy to be set out early on in the specification, and that can then define the method that the rest of the specification is to follow with regards to fire performance, which you previously couldn't do when using CAUS. There's a lot of guidance included within this section, with reference to the appropriate regulation and standards that can make it clearer for the specifier to determine the most appropriate fire methodology to use. Following the briefing stage, the plan of work moves on to the design and delivery stage. This initially starts with Stage 2 concept design and Stage 3 spatial coordination. I must note, though, that Regulation 7 and 38 should also be considered at this stage, so that the appropriate use of materials are selected and used, and that the provision of fire safety information to the responsible person at the completion of the project can be identified. Fire performance can be expressed in the form of the fire resistance and the reaction to fire properties of a material or product. Fire resistance performance considers the ability of an element to withstand fire or offer protection from it. Fire resistance cannot typically be determined for individual components of an element, which is a collection of systems, meaning a wall, floor or roof, etc., or a system, meaning a collection of products. The resistance is provided by the whole. To determine fire resistance at elemental level, PM 35-3030, item 20, as shown on the screen here, may be used. It includes all of the main elements. I've shown the clause item in relation to European classification, but there are separate clauses if UK classification is appropriate. As the design evolves, fire needs to be considered at the design and delivery stage. In the RIBA plan of work, this is Stage 4 technical design and Stage 5 manufacturing and construction. Within NBS Chorus, this greater technical specification can be found by specifying systems or products. I have added an example on the screen now of a door set system we have within our software where they can be specified along with their fire performance requirements. Door sets are a good example of a system that only complies when tested with all of its components together. Every component within a fire door set or fire door assembly can have an effect on the fire performance. Making changes to any of these components, especially the door leaf, can have a significant effect on its fire performance, and as such can lead to non-compliance with any certification provided without further testing. In this example shown on screen for door set systems, fire performance can be added through the drop-down menu in System Performance, as shown here in blue. Working through the door set systems, you can also have completion clauses. In this case, I've added verification that is available as part of the system completion. Finally, you can also look at adding any facility management requirement. For this door set example, I've shown the addition of fire door inspection and maintenance. Although I've mainly been showing architectural examples in Chorus, as those are the areas I work on, you need to be aware that we do also cover other disciplines, and they all have consideration of fire performance also. I won't go into specific detail, but just quickly show examples of non-architectural content NBS Chorus has. For example, we do cover MEP services. Examples include sprinkler systems as part of our plumbing content, vertical platform lift systems as part of our mechanical content, smoke and heat detection shutdown control systems for our electrical content. We also have structural and landscape content. I've added an example of precast concrete pad and strip foundation systems for you to see, but there are many more available within Chorus. When doing the technical design, it is important to maintain the fire integrity. Our content prompts the specifier to consider the junctions between construction elements and requirements around fire stopping, cavity barriers, etc., either through prompts in the guidance or with actual clause items in the system and products. These would typically be included for systems where they have been assessed to be appropriate. But if they are not there, do not worry. The software is fully editable to allow the user to add any of these themselves, either by adding new rows or by using the really useful more content functionality that is available. This can be selected at the bottom of the drop-down menu of each row. Each row here, you can just click on it and get the more content function. At this stage, the construction product regulations can come into effect, requiring CE marking and a supply of a declaration of performance for any product or kit covered by a harmonised European standard. Note that the CE mark under the construction product regulations is not a mark of quality. Third-party testing and certification should be relied upon for performance validation. My recommendation, therefore, is always to check the certification from a manufacturer before specifying, and to check that the standard referred to is the most current harmonised standard. Beware though, because for various reasons there can be a substantial delay between the issue of a standard and it becoming harmonised through its publication in the official journal of the European Union. And so the latest standard available may not actually be the current standard that the product can be sold or as such manufactured to. I can only ask that you always double check. In the final stages of a project, the two final stages of the plan of work include Item 6 handover and Item 7 use. In the closing stages, NBS can assist in several ways. Although a lot of people see verification as being something you do at the end of a project, there are opportunities within or throughout our specification structure to state how and when the project and construction information should be checked and verified, which can support recording of the verification of fire performance and therefore maintaining the golden thread. I showed an example earlier for door set systems. I would refer to a short presentation that Stephen did at Autodesk University London last year, as this gives a good summary of an audited trail of transparent decisions throughout the project timeline. It briefly covers transparency, the audit trail, and recording of substitutions. You can still view this presentation on our website, and I have noted the details on the screen for you to watch later. Please note that it is the third presentation, and you can find that if you just scroll down the page. I do recommend the other presentations that you should also find of interest. Finally, when you get to the end of a job, you have the opportunity to evaluate the project, identify lessons learnt, and these can be fed back into your masters that can then be used in your next project at stage 0, or to provide guidance to your design team in the future. Masters probably require a separate webinar in itself, and you can find a tutorial through the help menu in Chorus that you can use to get you started. I've shown a snapshot of the aforementioned tutorial, and I recommend you look at it along with the many others that we have available online. To summarise then, NBS Chorus can help to deliver specifications that are in line with the fire safety strategy as defined in the RIBA plan of works through performance and prescriptive specification, and using editable clauses that are supported by maintained technical guidance. At NBS, we look to always develop our content, and for this, NBS Chorus content is continually evolving, informed by research, user feedback, and industry drivers. The fire content at NBS is continually being reviewed to improve clarity and usefulness. At NBS, we're hopeful that with dialogue and exchange between practitioners, the wider construction industry, and ourselves, we can help to accelerate these actions. Just before I finish up, I just wanted to let you know about NBS Source. To bring you right up to date, NBS have created a new manufacturer product platform, bringing together NBS BIM Library, NBS Plus, and RIBA Product Selector. NBS Source is a brand new tool that will create a single source for product information that will integrate seamlessly into your project workflow and provide an additional level of enhanced product data in a consistent, structured format. The next slide is going to show you a quick video of what this entails, and it will show you how it's aligned with the requirements for structured data set out in the Hackett report. Here we see a product in NBS Source, Rockwool Firebar Barrier Slab. First you will see an image of the product where it is located, the product name, and it shows you that the data is current. Next you see any third-party certification if available. We then also have links to specification and digital data. The application of the product is also confirmed. General information is next and provides information on the product such as material and size, but also includes data such as recyclability. It then includes specification detail, and as you can see, this is alignment between the product data and the NBS generic specification clause, which includes fire for performance in this case. Finally, it includes any digital objects and literature for the product. Contact details for the manufacturer are found at the top of the page. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, James. Just to wrap up quickly from me, it's pretty much on the hour now, I think. If you do want to download the RIBA plan of work and the accompanying overview guide, that's all completely free at architecture.com. Just search RIBA plan of work on Google, you'll land on this page, and you've got the free downloads here, the overview, a little toolbox, Excel template, and the picture of the plan itself. All of the screenshots James showed were from NBS Chorus, which is our cloud specification tool. And you see you've got an editor with template specification clauses and extensive guidance on the right hand side. If you've enjoyed this webinar, we do have more coming up. So you can watch on demand the sustainability one, this is the fire safety one, and then coming up we have a webinar on information exchanges, concentrating specifically on specification, and health and safety booked in as well, and stay tuned for more coming soon as well. So thank you once again. I hope you found the Dame Judith Hackett webinar extremely interesting, and then really went into the detail there with James as well on how to actually specify requirements around fire safety. If you'd like any more information about NBS, please get in touch. Visit architecture.com and the nbs.com to find out more. And by all means, pop your feedback and drop questions into the comment feature, and we'll follow up on those. So thank you very much. Stay safe, everybody, and thank you.